the difference. Radio 786.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to On the Couch on Radio 786 on 100.4 FM. On the Couch aims to unpack, deal and discuss issues that we don't always want to address, but issues that most certainly affect you or those close to you. So let's hear the difference here on Radio 786 on 100.4 FM. Now it is Thursday, and that of course means it is time for the weekly advice assembly with Reclaim the City and Ndifuna Ukwazi. In studio today I am joined by the facilitators. It is Ashura Easton as well as Bushley Boy, and he joins us as well. This evening we're taking a further look at what to do when your landlord disconnects your electricity or changes your locks. What are your rights as a tenant? And of course we're still looking at construction, eviction and spoliation order. So of course in every a weekly assembly, we of course know that a weekly assembly is a weekly meeting of tenants, occupiers and activists hosted by Reclaim the City and Ndifuna Ukwazi. It is also a space to learn about eviction laws and also our rights and responsibilities as tenants, and to stand in solidarity to prevent and resist unlawful evictions and unfair landlord practices. Social solidarity and sharing knowledge is even more essential now in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic and also massive economic hardships facing the country. Now, during this weekly on-air assembly, we will be covering topics such as what the current position is on evictions, especially now that the state of disaster has come to an end, tenants who cannot pay rent and what to do as both the landlord and the tenant, some of the unlawful evictions and what to do if you are being unlawfully evicted, various ways your landlords can harass you, and what can be done about them cutting services like electricity and your water supply. And that is specifically what we will be discussing in this one. And then of course looking at the responsibilities of bodies like the police, the court, the rental housing tribunal, where you can seek help if there's institutional can't or won't help you, and then early cancellations of leases by the landlord or the tenant. Rent is obviously getting more expensive while people have lost income and face rising cost of living. Now remember, you can be part of our conversation. You may give us a call on 021 699 1786. WhatsApp your comments, your questions to 0786 10 11 12. And we welcome both Ashura Easton and Bushley Boy to this evening's edition of On the Couch. Good evening and thanks so much for your time.
Thanks.
Bushley, it's been a while, so thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, it's been a while and it's great to be back here.
Ashura, assalamu alaikum, and it's lovely having you in studio again.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Now, of course, we have been speaking much about Megan's case, right? Now, this week we go back to Megan. We are back with her story, and who lives in Kilsdale with her 3-year-old daughter. Megan's landlord stopped maintaining the building and cut off her water and electricity. To make matters worse, last Tuesday, Megan returned home to find her belongings outside on the pavement. So the question remains, what can Megan do in this particular situation? Bushley, let's start with you.
Very well. What a welcome. Zainab, firstly, I think it's very important to identify what that is.
Okay.
When your landlord cuts off your electricity. And we'd call that what we call a constructive eviction. A constructive eviction, Zainab, is when the landlord or the landowner does things that make your stay on the property very unbearable. For instance, cutting off electricity is one of those things. So that would be a constructive eviction, an attempt to get you to leave the house by doing those tactics. But there's a recourse in terms of what people can do when they are faced with such a situation. And one of the first things that people must do is to check whether the electricity has been cut off and communicate with the landlord to say, but what is the situation, what has caused or what has led to this particular situation of cutting off of electricity, and check with the City of Cape Town when a situation of load shedding in this country, and check whether it's that situation or not, so that you inform your own action around this particular scenario. But what you can do though, as another recourse, is that you can go to the Rental Housing Tribunal to report this particular issue, to get to what you'd call a spoliation order. an urgent application where your electricity has been cut off and you need it urgently to be brought back on. Yeah.
Now, according to my understanding, Ashura, constructive eviction, as Bushley explained, is illegal according to the Constitution. Am I right?
That's correct, yes.
Now, speak to us about what makes it illegal.
The fact that the Constitution as well as the PI Act protects all of us as citizens to these kinds of things. So anything that would constitute a constructive eviction would make it illegal, and the landlords could face up to a 2-year sentence or a fine should they not concede to any of those. So it is very protective to tenants, but it also highlights that landlords should too know that even though it is their property, that they can't just make and do with tenants, because if they had to put themselves in the tenant's shoes, they wouldn't like that to be done by them to them. But if you look at it in the bigger picture, it's more about being fair, you know. So it definitely protects us in the Constitution as well as to the rights and to things that we have for each and every one of us that is actually staying here.
Okay. Now we are looking at what to do when your landlord disconnects your electricity or changes your locks. What are the rights of the tenant? Now, I'm interested to know, in terms of bodies such as the police in this case, what becomes their responsibility?
So there is a situation where, Zainab, that your electricity has been cut off, and you go to the rental housing tribunal, and there is another form of what we'd call a constructive eviction. You get at home, your house is locked, and your belongings are outside, and the situation where your landlord is intimidating you, send you intimidating SMSs to try to stop you from being in your home, or sending people to force you out or to intimidate you out of your home. So that is a criminal offence, as Ashura had said. It is a crime to evict a person without an order of the court. We know that in order for a landlord to evict someone out of their home, they need to go to make an application in court to say that I need Ashura out of my home because of A, B, and C, so that that legal process takes its course. Anything outside of an order that is granted by a magistrate is illegal and therefore constitutes a crime. So the role of the police then is informed by the PI Act, that they need to act on this criminality to try, if you are constructively evicted, to restore you into the possession of your property. That's the role that they have according to the Rental Housing Act. So they have that role to enforce orders even of the Rental Housing Tribunal, so that the landlords do not continue to conduct extrajudicial evictions. So that's a role that police play. Unfortunately, that's not always the case that we see in police stations, because this is primarily because police themselves are not fully trained in the context of eviction law. Therefore, they take to side with landlords because they believe that this is a possession and property of the landlord. Therefore, they have a right to do whatever they so wish, and that's not the case. There is law in this country, and that's what must be followed. A process. There's an eviction process that must be followed, and the police are there to enforce the law. And not the breakers of the law. So they have that responsibility.
0216991786 or 0786101112. If you'd like to be part of the conversation this evening, we're looking at constructive eviction and also spoliation order with Ashura Easton as well as Bushley Boy. And we're particularly focusing on Megan's case. And we know that Megan, we've been talking about her for quite some time now. And she is the one that lives in Keldriver, and she has a 3-year-old daughter. Megan's landlord stopped maintaining the the building and also cut off her electricity and water supply. And to make matters even worse, last Tuesday, Megan returned home to find that her belongings outside on the pavement. So we're asking the question, what in this case can Megan really do? And of course, we discussed the role of the police in this case. And it seems like in this particular matter that the landlord has taken matters into their own hand, isn't it?
Definitely.
Definitely.
Yeah, and this is something that should not happen, isn't it?
No, not at all.
Something that shouldn't happen.
So let's say the police was not involved. What then becomes, because, I mean, to make matters worse, her belongings was also on the pavement. So this leaves her with very little choice. But what advice would you give to someone like Megan?
So one of the first steps or the first things that Megan can do in a situation where they find themselves with their belongings outside, the first thing is you must take pictures of the situation that you find yourself in, so that you are able to prove that indeed, when the time requires that you go to court, to prove that my belongings were outside indeed, through taking pictures and building a record of the damage that has been caused to your property. And oftentimes these things happen, Zainab, during holidays or at night, when people are being pushed out of their homes or their belongings outside, or when kids come back from school and they find a surprise of their belongings home and they're left with nowhere else to go, rendered homeless as a result of this unlawful act. So one of the things that a person has is again what we've been saying, because it's an urgent matter. You can't stay outside, you can't sleep outside. Therefore, urgently something needs to happen. And what do? There's what you call, again, an spoliation order. I don't know if Comrade Ashura wants to speak to that.
Yeah, I think at this point it's important to just explain what a spoliation order really is.
Okay, so a spoliation order is a remedy to protect your peaceful and undisturbed possession of your property or occupation. It is a legal tool that you can use to get back into your home if your landlord has illegally evicted you. So a spoliation is an application procedure that means you put all the facts in an affidavit which is given to the magistrate to consider and make an order. So the spoliation is often instituted on an urgent basis. In this case, in an order of spoliation to be granted, you as the tenant must show that you were unlawfully deprived of possession of your home, or that your basic services like your water and electricity was cut off. So in a spoliation case, you would definitely need legal assistance, and then someone who has had their occupation illegally disrupted. So without that, you won't get very far. But the places that you could go to could be like a law centre, or you could go to the rental housing tribunal. But like Bushle has said, the taking of the pictures is very important, because that's actually how you build your case. And then also to go to the police services as well, because that's where you can open up the criminal case and then go to the rental housing tribunal. In my case, I also had that, but I had where the landlord changed my locks. And it was about after 5-6 o'clock in the evening when I got home. My things fortunately was not outside, but my locks were changed. So I was able to, due to the fact that I had the knowledge of my rights at the time, because I was attending classes at Reclaim the City and with INU, where they've guided us and, empowered me. So I cut the lock, and then I changed the padlock and the stuff just so that I could get in by the gate. And then from there, I went down to the police station and actually wrote out an affidavit. And then the next morning, because my case was where I already had an eviction process going. So, and then the next morning meant that I would have needed to have gone to my attorneys, and then obviously I had to have given in the affidavit there. So I was okay. But in Megan's case, it's a little bit different. Hey, Bushle?
Yeah. I mean, what Comrade Ashura is describing is that you find your belongings outside, and the other recourse that you have is self-spoliation. And it's very important that we build solidarity in communities that we stay in. to get your neighbors, to get people from RTC, if you belong to a movement, to come support you and to do self-spoliation, people's spoliation, to actually do that process yourself. What Ashura is saying, cut off the logs, get back inside, because your peace has been disturbed. And as a tenant, you have a right to an undisturbed peace or space of privacy in your home, without being disturbed by or disrupted by the landlord. If they did that, you have a right to restore that yourself, without maybe even going to the police. But of course, it's important that you go to the police station to file an affidavit of what has happened. Yes.
You're listening to On the Couch on Radio 786, and that's the voice of Bushle Boya. Also have in studio Ashura Easton, and we're talking about what to do when your landlord disconnects your electricity or changes your locks. What are the rights of the tenants? These are a few questions that came via WhatsApp. One of it asked, why was Megan evicted, and what really constitutes or what validates an eviction? That's the one question. Then also, what happens when you illegally occupying a premises without a landlord's permission?
Very important question. I mean, in the context of Megan, what we hear in the scenario is that Megan had been constructively evicted, her belongings, outside and so on.
And constructively evicted, meaning that your living conditions has been made unbearable.
And there is no court order.
Okay.
That had been granted or sought from the courts. Remember that you must, if a landlord wants to evict you, they must make an application to the court so that they are granted an eviction. Because what needs to happen is that the magistrates needs to ascertain and be sure that the person being evicted will not be rendered into homelessness. So the personal circumstances of the person that is being evicted and the rights need to be protected. So that's why you need to go through that process so that people are not displaced and rendered homeless. So how you identify a legal eviction is that there must be a court order. That's that. And anything outside of that is an extrajudicial and unlawful and an illegal eviction. It is a criminal offense.
And then the other question, of course, what happens when you are illegally occupying the premises of a landlord without his permission?
Ashura, do you want to?
This would be the right of the landlord in this case.
Again, I think Ashura will
look. It's just asking, what is the
basically what happens when you illegally occupying a premises without the landlord's permission?
What happens is that irrespective if you are occupying legally or illegally, you need to, if that landlord wants you out of the property, they need to start with a court order. That's fortunate or unfortunate to either side.
Yeah.
You know, many times people would say that people are there illegally, but it could be that they actually have a verbal agreement that they are there. This might not be the case, and the person might have just occupied that space, and yes, without the consent of the landlord. But if the landlord does want those tenants to be out, then they would actually need to follow the process. So people just need to remember that there's no eviction without a court order. So until that first process starts, that is when the eviction starts. Anything before that, it's not happening.
I think it's important to just remind the listeners that, of course, landlords have the right to evict tenants, and that you cannot take the law into your own hands.
Definitely.
You must follow the correct legal process and seek an eviction order from the court, and that is basically what we are saying. So if you have any other questions, 0786 10 11 12 or 021 699 1786. Here's one comment of a person saying that we have involved the police, but unfortunately we've had no luck with them assisting, and I think that was one of the points that was made earlier, isn't it?
Yes. I think one of the problems, that's a problem that it's a daily lived reality of a lot of people that seek justice through that institution. But it is not the only institution that people can go to, as you've mentioned. that people have other recourses
Yeah.
in terms of going to the rental housing tribunal. Because what the rental housing tribunal does is that it tries to mediate between the tenant and the landlord where there is a conflict that has arisen, so that a suitable solution is found. And again, an order of the rental housing tribunal stands as an order of the court.
Yes.
So the landlord will be obliged to follow that order.
Yeah.
So if people are not able to get access through the police system, they should go to the rental housing tribunal. But again, very important that when people go through that institution of SABS and they are not getting the help that they are supposed to get, it's very important to get the details of the person that is assisting you or refusing thereof to assist you, so that you are able to report such matters, because these are institutions that people are supposed to be accessing justice from.
Definitely.
Just coming back to a spoliation order, what is the process here? Is legal assistance required when you're going for this particular, when you're applying for a spoliation order?
It is advised, yes, because it would be an order from the court that would come through. You can go to the rental housing tribunal on your own, and that is where you will be assisted. So, like Bushle has explained, it would be to try to resolve the conflict between the landlord and the tenant. So they would actually do that. So the rental housing tribunal is a place of court where these things actually happen. So they have the power, like any other court, to initiate and fulfill, I think is the right word, to give orders, and those orders would need to be carried through by the landlord. So failing a landlord to actually to comply to those are also criminal cases that could be pushed through.
So spoliation order, right, is something that must be granted based on what you bring to the court.
That's correct, yes.
And so after this is granted, then what does this mean for the tenant?
So what this means is that the tenant can be restored back into the premises. Again, we must remember that a spoliation order is a very urgent application on order. It is done on the basis of urgency of the issue. Be it that your electricity has been cut off, be it that you've been locked outside, be it that your property has been locked. So in legal terms, a spoliation order is a legal tool to get you back into the property if you're illegally evicted. Again, this is based on the premise that no one should take law into their own hands. So that's why it is important. It is an important remedy. And again, as Ashura has said, is that people should seek legal assistance either from Cape Law Society, from your legal aid, from your rental housing tribunal, as soon as possible, as soon as the issue happens or this unlawful eviction happens. I must try to get assistance. Again, these things happen overnight. If a person is able to stay at a friend's house, they should do that, or wake up very early in the morning to go seek this assistance.
So how long does it take to be granted this particular spoliation order?
Those kinds of orders, because of the urgency, like especially the one where you are outside, that could be granted on the same day. Yeah. The same as for your electricity and your water, because those are basic essentials that needs to be done.
And then just remind our listeners once again, in terms of seeking help, where they can go to. You mentioned that the Rental Housing Tribunal is one. I know Legal Aid SA also, but where else can people go?
I mean, people can, again, in the cases of constructive evictions and all these things, again, people and communities have themselves to rely on when these unfair and unjust and unlawful evictions happen. Those that belong to movements should seek help from those. But also, as we mentioned, that people can seek help from Legal Aid, the Rental Housing Tribunal and Cape Law Society and other law clinics that deal with these issues of evictions across the country. Any law firm would be able to assist people. And again, if a spoliation order is granted, Zainab, it has an effect to being a final order. But again, the landlord may appeal this decision if they so wish to. And
Yeah.
this doesn't stop them from going back again to following the lawful process. The fact that the order has been made final doesn't mean that they can go and make an application to court to say that, but I still want Ashura out of my home. So they would need to follow that legal process.
Mm-hmm. But of course, a landlord can be fined or given a prison sentence. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. So, and of course, it would be almost, I think Ashura mentioned earlier, that it is kind of a breach of the Rental Housing Act, like unfair practice if they do cut off the electricity, or any tenant can, or like when they're not giving it to the tenant whatever it is that they need. And then it is almost like a breach of a breach of the Rental Housing Act, is it?
That's correct, yes.
And for this reason. Okay, once again, just a reminder to the listener that if you find yourself in this particular situation, and spoliation usually requires legal assistance, someone who has had the occupation illegally disrupted, for example, eviction without a court order, should immediately seek help from either Legal Aid, the Legal Practice Council, the Rental Housing Tribunal, or housing law firms like Legal Aid SA, Legal Practice Council, and then also you can visit probono.org, and those are some of the things that I'll mention at the end again for your, because there's quite a few people wanting to know how to go about that. Pushle?
Just again, a very important thing in terms of what people can do. Because you'll find a situation where you are unable, as I named, to get legal assistance, and this has happened overnight, and people can go to the court themselves and ask to speak to speak to the clerk of the civil court, and they must detail down the scenario of what has happened and ask to get a spoliation application to be assisted. And it's very important when you do that yourself, when you haven't been able to get legal assistance, that you take down the details of the person at the court that has been assisting you. So people can go through that route themselves.
Okay, there you have it. And of course, once again, if you are at the stage where you need any legal representation, you can also contact Ndifuna Ukwazi's Housing Clinic on 062 352 9372. That's 062 352 9372. You may also email NU Law Centre at nu.org.za, and email Ntombi at nu.org.za, Mondays to Fridays. Any final closing remarks from your side in terms of what can be done in terms of the tenant in the case of Megan, Ashura?
I think with Megan, definitely, or anybody in Megan's situation, look, many times it would be like at the time of day when these offices are closed, so if you feel that you're not able to do the self-spoliation, which would mean changing the locks again and actually getting inside, then yes, taking the photos and moving along to SAPS and finding a place of safety for the night. But then in the morning to actually go to the Rental Housing Tribunal, which is in town, or to find a pro bono attorney or an attorney if you can afford one, and get the spoliation order in process. Other than that, I think to take the details of the SAPS members, it is very important, because we need to remember that our SAPS members out there in all areas needs to be educated in the lines of the eviction process, to be able to assist the community, because many times they do believe that the landlord does have all the rights. Many times they too would possibly be in the shoes of the tenants, and they don't even know what to do also. So they should also then just remember that they are actually just the peace officers, and just do what is necessary. For many people, when they are in a situation like that, I think fear overcomes them, but they just need to remain calm. And if they are with a movement, then actually just phone, and people will be out there to assist them, definitely.
Absolutely, but I do think that we should definitely welcome the police services becoming more aware of what should be done in cases of evictions. I think that's all we do have time for now. Once again, a reminder that if you do need legal representation, contact Ndifuna Ukwazi, and they can be contacted on 062 352 9372. Also, a reminder that the 10-week program, the Advice Assembly, happens still at it started on the 18th of May, and it continues, and it is at Bertha House 6769 69 Main Road in Mowbray. You can contact the number 0659931324 or email usra@nu.org.za. I say many thanks to both my guests, Ashura Easton as well as Bushde Boy, for joining me this evening, particularly looking at what to do when your landlord disconnects your electricity or changes your locks and what the rights of the tenants are. Until next week when we are in each other's company again, thanks so much and Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.